Welcome to SheVentures. I'm Doria, co-founder of CentSai. Listen to women who take risks, build community, and get shit done. Recording from Madison Avenue in New York City. Today's show is brought to you by Audible. Audible is offering our listeners a free audiobook with a 30-day trial membership. Just go to audibletrial.com/SheVentures and browse the unmatched selection of audio programs. Download a title free and start listening. It's that easy. Go to audibletrial.com/SheVentures to get started today. Today on SheVentures, we are going to talk about sex and entrepreneurship. More specifically, about a woman who wasn't willing to accept the unexplained pain she endured while having sex that started in her early 20s. A burning, stabbing pain that was so intense, there was a time that she and her fiancé, her then fiancé, put physical intimacy on the back burner completely while they prepared for their wedding. But let's face it, sexual health is important. This woman took matters into her own hands, found and confirmed her medical diagnosis, tried various medicines and therapies that ultimately didn't help, catapulting her into the world of entrepreneurship. After intensive research, she created a magnetic vaginal dilator set that helps women with pelvic pain. Tara Langdale-Schmidt, welcome to SheVentures.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So before we get into your company, can you tell our listeners a little bit about you, where you grew up?
Yeah, I was born in Everett, Washington State. On the other side of the country, I ended up in Florida now, so it was sunny palm trees for rain.
I was going to say, I'm a Pacific Northwester myself originally, so I know about that.
Yeah. So when I was about 15 and a half, we moved down here because my mother sold cruises, and we used to always just go out of cruises out of Florida, and we're like, why are we living up here in the cold and the rain when we could be living in Florida? So we moved when we were about 15 and a half, and been down here ever since and love it. I live in Sarasota, Florida. It's absolutely beautiful. I do have a twin sister. Moved down here with my mom and my twin sister and my stepdad. We just loved it. We love the beaches, and I'm glad that we moved down here because I feel like I've had opportunities here that I would have never had back home. We did a little bit of finished high school, did some college, but I've had 11 surgeries, so that kind of altered my plan to finish school and things like that because it's either pay for school or pay for surgeries. I feel like when you're an entrepreneur, though, sometimes you don't need to finish school, and I'm a perfect example of that. I taught myself, almost everything that I know when it comes to entrepreneurship.
I love that. You know, it's interesting you say that because my father was also an entrepreneur. He came to the U.S. after World War II, and he didn't finish college, and he did just fine. And so I think there's a lot to be said for learning by doing, right?
Exactly. And I know that my employees make more than a lot of people, and my employees that are in college now are already making more than a lot of college graduates.
Who was the biggest influence in your childhood and why?
Probably my I would have to say my father. He passed away in 2011 from cancer, lung cancer, but he was just always Team Tara, and whatever I wanted to do, I was graphic designing at age 11, starting little businesses here and there. So he was just, everything was go with the flow. He didn't expect anything out of me, but I had a good grade point average. I was a good student. He taught me that life is just, it's not too serious. Some people your parents have high expectations of you, but he just, whatever makes you happy. And, when I deal with my friends and the challenges they're facing in their lives, you just really need to be happy. Sometimes money, it doesn't matter. You just really need to focus on yourself.
It's so true. Yourself and your health and the well-being of people around you. Speaking of health, in your 20s research, you brought to your doctor's attention that you thought you had a condition called Vulvodynia. I want to make sure I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Yeah, vulvodynia. Yeah.
which, to be honest, I consider that I know a fair bit about women's health, and I didn't know about this condition, which makes me wonder why. So it's discomfort and burning around the vulva, and I'll get into a more exact definition a little bit later. And an estimated 16% of women, which I think I calculated to be 120 million, may experience this condition, but it's often overlooked. Why do you think that is based on your experience?
Well, I feel like there's two reasons. You can compare it, if you want to compare it to another condition that doesn't have to do with sexual health, it would be fibromyalgia. And if we look back 20 years to fibromyalgia, they thought it was, just in people's heads. They didn't know what causes it. So if you want to compare it to another condition, that's what I would compare it to. Yeah, there's no known cause, but there are a lot of things that people have. They have sensitive skin. They might have had back surgery. And there's a lot of things that collectively women have IBS that when you hear they have vulvodynia too, you're not going to be surprised. So there is something that happens. There's like a group of people where it's going to be more prevalent. But so I think there's a couple reasons why people don't know about it and doctors don't know about it. First, it's a newer condition, even though it's not like maybe medically or in journals, it's more of a newer condition that isn't talked about. Plus, a lot of women don't talk about it. And that's not their fault for not talking about it. They don't want to talk about it. They're not creating awareness, so they're not talking about it with their friends and family because it's such a personal issue. It's not getting the awareness it needs maybe on social media, or people aren't aware, there's not commercials about it. It's not like erectile dysfunction gets all this press, but women's sexual health doesn't. And that I can't answer why, but I think we need to start talking about it more. And that's why I share my story. And then another thing is, if you're not talking to your doctor about it, they're not researching it to keep up with it. And a lot of doctors, went to medical school. You go to an older physician, they went to medical school 30 years ago, and they weren't taught about vulvodynia, and nobody's coming into their office talking about it. They're not going to know. And then the couple that are coming in, they're not going to really know what it is, and they're going to start searching around. And that's kind of what my doctor did. He's like, I don't know what this is, drink wine, take some Advil. And I'm like, I don't really think that's going to work. This really hurts.
And I think that that's an ongoing issue in women's health, where oftentimes we're told, well, it's really more in your head than it is a physical thing, or women are more sensitive to pain, when in fact I think none of that it can really be substantiated at all.
So it's just kind of like women not wanting to talk about it as much, doctors not researching it as much. I have women call, and I don't claim to be a doctor or anything like that, but I do know a lot about the conditions. And I say, read these conditions, read about them. They tell me their symptoms, read about them, talk to your doctor about it. And they're like, we've learned more from you in 10 minutes on the phone than I have in 10 years at my doctor's.
I was just going to say that's also because you've experienced it firsthand, right?
Yeah, and then there's about 8 other conditions too. And one of them is just simple vaginal atrophy that women deal with after menopause, which is completely normal. It's not fun, but it is very common. And they'll go to their doctor, and their doctor won't give them any sort of treatment plan for simple vaginal atrophy. And it's sad. I mean, I talked to 2 ladies in their mid 50s last week. They had no clue what vaginal atrophy was, and they both gone through menopause, and sex hurts both of them.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you say that, because I'm more on that side of things now than I am in terms of having children. I've been there, done that. But what I will say is that the first thing that doctors tend to do is, well, not all doctors, not all are the same, but there is this thing of, well, oh, hormone replacement therapy, that's what you need. Or, there's got to be a pill that will fix your problem. When, to your point, not in the case of vulvodynia, which is a condition, but in the case of vaginal atrophy, also a condition. But there's also something to be said for the fact that women's bodies change over time.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And the thing is they want to give everybody, whether it's nerve related, muscular related, or, aging related, they just want to give you a pill to help with the symptoms, but they didn't give you any instruction on how to make the symptoms not start, or, they want to mask the pain. So say your pelvic floor is a basket of muscles. If you Google pelvic floor muscles, you'll be shocked. It is a basket of muscles. So when you tell somebody, well, if you can get a Charlie horse in your leg, why can't you have, a muscle spasm in your pelvic floor? They look at you cross-eyed.
Right.
But I don't understand why a muscle in your pelvic floor is different than your hamstring or your calf muscle. It doesn't make sense, and that absolutely happens in your pelvic floor. And you can pull a muscle, your muscles will spasm, and they think it's just this forgotten part about us that hurts us a lot, that people think like they just don't relate it to other parts of the body. It's like its own land that never lands, like nobody knows about. But it's the same tissues and the same muscles and the same nerves.
It's such a great point that you're making, because you're right. It's all a part of the human body after all. So why should we be ashamed or just not willing to talk about it for whatever reason? For our listeners, I just wanted to provide a definition of vulvodynia that I read from the association page that you referred to. So it's pain in the vulva, and you also mentioned, and is also true, there are many other conditions, but this is the one that we're talking about today. It's a chronic condition characterized by burning, stinging, and stabbing sensations. And it's been described as having acid poured on one's skin or feeling a constant knife-like pain. For some, the pain can be constant and impact every aspect of their life. For others, it might be with pressure or contact, or during sex, or during prolonged periods of sitting. So I would imagine you've seen the spectrum, but I wanted to talk about your situation, which you've shared very openly, and how it manifested for you and got you interested in finding a solution.
I actually always wanted to be a doctor growing up. And when I can't find something or I don't get the right answer, I will search and search and search. Kind of changed because I have had so many medical issues. I said I don't want to spend one more day in the hospital. So that's how that kind of changed. But I feel like I help people in a different way now. I help people that nobody else will, or is helping. There are people to help you. Don't get me wrong. You just have to know where to find them, and we'll talk about that later. It started out me going to the physician and saying, this hurts and it's getting worse and worse. Well, I've had so many surgeries for endometriosis, starting from when I was 11, dealing with cysts and having my one ovary and fallopian tube removed. So I've had a lot going on down there anyways. It's hard to decipher what's what when kind of you've had surgery on all parts of it already, all parts of your reproductive system already. So went to the physician, this pain kind of hurts. Okay, well, then the next couple months, it hurts a little bit more, but I'm also dealing with vulvodynia, or excuse me, with endometriosis at the same time. So you're thinking, okay, well, it's part of endometriosis, and you don't know how to decipher the different pain areas that you're dealing with or the types of pain because nobody's really explained it to you. I was told my doctor, he delivers babies all day, every day. He's an OBGYN. Well, I wasn't pregnant or trying to be, but, he's my doctor, and that happens to a lot of women. They go to an OBGYN and, telling him, okay, well, you just need to relax. And I'm like, that's not working. And this feels like it's something different. And as far as that definition earlier, it's in the vulva, but it's also can be in the vulvar vestibule, which is the entrance, and then it can be, a little bit inside sometimes, and that's kind of where it gets me. It got worse, and then he started, I think there's something a little bit more wrong, and let's try some gabapentin compounded creams with ketamine, gabapentin, very strong medications that most of the time they can give women orally when it's very bad, for vulvodynia, which is not good to take. It has side effects, and you do not want to take anything orally for your vulvodynia unless you have to, which some women have to. Women are committing suicide because of this. It burns 24 hours a day. They can't walk. They can't lie down. They can't sit down. They want to be in a bathtub, and I'm part of forums. And the women are like, I'm in the bathtub. I never want to get out of this bathtub again in my life. My husband just walked out the door. my doctor did start, talking to other physicians. And in the middle of this, I saw Vulvodynia online. And I was like, well, this is what I have. I just know it. I went to him and I said, do I have vulvodynia? And he's like, then, a little light bulb went off in his head and he did some research. He's like, I think this is exactly what you have. So I diagnosed myself. So I said, okay, he's nice. He's not being mean. He's listening to me, but just not as educated in pelvic pain as I needed him to be. And he talked to 6 other physicians and he pulled me into his office, not even the exam room. And he said, I don't know how to fix this, and neither do these other doctors. They don't know what causes it. I said, okay. I am not a stranger to crazy medical problems. I've had a lot of tumors removed all over my body. So, I just keep plugging along and I started doing research.
Did that moment feel sort of, I would imagine it depends on one's personality, but if I heard that and I was in chronic pain from a doctor, I would feel pretty devastated. Did you have any feeling of that, or was it just an immediate, you know what, I'm going to figure this out?
Well, I did feel defeated a little bit, but I always have the feeling that everything can be fixed in some way or another. But I'm emotional right now, even talking about it. It was hard.
Oh, I can imagine.
Yeah, but I've gone through so much. I just kept, I'm a fighter. So, and I mean, I'm more emotional about it now, I think, than I was then, just thinking about it.
I was going to say, you have probably now at least you've distanced yourself from the physical pain, so maybe you're feeling the emotional pain of it, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and dealing with other things now that I feel like can't be fixed because I've had so many surgeries. So I feel like everything can be fixed, but I'm dealing with I have a bad back injury. So it just brings up what I've been dealing with lately. Yeah, but I'm starting Pilates today, and so we're going to try to work on that. But I feel like I'm always fighting for myself and trying to make myself feel better. So it's just bringing me back to just, at that time when I had to do that. So I was reading online and I saw vulvodynia and fibromyalgia in the same paragraph. And you want to talk about a light bulb going off in my head. My mom had fibromyalgia in 1996. So now we're going back to when people don't believe you. She spent $40,000 on doctors. There was no Lyrica, which I don't love, but I know a lot of people take for fibromyalgia and nerve pain. And I was like, well, what? My mom used neodymium magnet therapy after meeting somebody else that had fibromyalgia. And my mom was in bed for 9 months. She had Epsom salt baths every day. Nothing helped her. I mean, I was giving my mom injections at 11. Just all these different treatments they were trying, kind of where fibromyalgia was a couple years ago. And I'm like, I'm going to put magnets inside a dilator because I had read about dilators. I'm like, there is no reason this is not going to work. I know this is going to work. I knew it. I knew it from the moment I thought of it. And I sat in the doctor's office when he was telling me, and I looked at him, I said, I'm going to put magnets inside a dilator. And he goes, why? I go, because my mom had fibromyalgia, and the neodymium magnets helped her so much. She had a complete sleep system. She had a comforter. She had the whole mattress full of these things. And I saw it change her life, and I know it helped her. And because I'm the one who took care of her, and I'm going to, one of the ones that took care of her, and I'm going to try it. And he goes, well, that's not a bad idea. And this is my doctor telling me, like a holistic thing might help me, because he said it might help you because, nothing else is at this point really helping. And I said, okay. So I ordered a set of hollow vaginal dilators, and I ordered some neodymium magnets and put them on a sleeve and put them inside. And within 2 weeks, I would say the pain, so my pain is provoked. So it's just with intercourse and then after, obviously. Within 2 weeks, my pain was down 60% of, my normal pain. And this is using the dilators, not right before intercourse, but using them twice a day, about 25 minutes. So I was like, oh my goodness.
And how does, because I've heard of magnet therapy, but I have to be honest, I don't know a lot about it. Can you explain how it works?
Yeah, so there isn't a specific, because it is like a natural thing, there isn't a specific how it works, but there have been studies done that show that it helps with the viscosity of the blood, and it helps thin out the blood to create blood flow easier to go through the blood vessels. So when you put a magnet to the skin, it stirs things up. It stirs the anatomy of the blood up, and you need blood flow to the area. And it also helps calm the nerves when you bring the blood flow to the area. So say you have, I'm going to say it because it's easier for people to understand. If you have, a muscle that's hurting in the top of your leg, that's why you go get a massage. We create blood flow to the area, and it helps calm the nerves in that area, and that's what the magnet's doing. And there's different, they say that it works with the iron in the blood. It definitely changes your blood and the physiology of your blood when you use a magnet. But it's one of those things that there's been a lot of studies done with magnets and pain, but when you ask a physician, they'll say there hasn't. It's the weirdest thing. It's like acupuncture. It's like, what is that? Why is acupuncture different than magnetic therapy? But they'll kind of go for acupuncture now, some of them.
Some of them, yeah, it's true. It's been, I think some of the Eastern modalities have begun to be accepted a little bit more. So, by changing the viscosity of the blood and having more blood flow in the area, is the idea then that it's helping to heal the area?
I don't say magnetic therapy helps heal. I wouldn't say it helps heal. It's going to reduce the pain during therapy, because what happens is when you have pain in your vagina, what happens is you start to tense up your muscles, or the muscles could already be tensed. So if it's vaginismus, the muscles are already going to be tense. So when you go to have intercourse, you start to tense up. It's going to help with relaxing the muscles before intercourse, or keeping them relaxed over a long period of time for these conditions. Now, the one thing that it can completely help and treat is vaginismus, because that is completely muscular related.
And define what that is.
Yeah, that is a tightening of the pelvic floor and the vaginal muscles. So it's like you can't get anything in, or very little. So that's where the muscles, and this can be a primary condition that you've had since birth. It can be, you can have sexual trauma and you can have it after that, or it can be a secondary condition to pelvic pain, because what happens is, so mine, I got it a little bit, but it came secondary because my vulvodynia started. Then I started to associate pain with intercourse. And once you start to do that, you can start to get vaginismus. And that's where your muscles clench up because the pain is coming.
Right. It becomes a vicious cycle.
Yeah. And my physician, that's one thing he did know. He did say, keep having intercourse because it's going to get worse. He didn't say because you're going to get vaginismus. He just said, but he did know it's going to get worse, and it will get worse. So if you use dilator therapy in between, and in between these intercourse sessions that you try to have, and hopefully you can start to have it, you're going to start relaxing those muscles, taking the fear of penetration away, and keeping those muscles from getting stagnant and tight. And that will help a lot with your, so even if you're not sexually active, even if you don't have pelvic pain, as you get older, you need to use dilators because you'll start to atrophy. Because it's true, and I hate to say this, but it's, if you don't use it, you will lose it. And it is 100% true. And women that go through menopause, do you want to guess what percentage women that find out about dilator therapy that are going through no one?
Well, I'm sure. No one. That makes a lot of sense to me, because I think this is bringing kind of a larger issue, which is also the fact that, to your point, people who went to medical school 30 years ago, or even 10 years ago, I think there's a little bit more of an acceptance that Western medicine is not the answer to every issue, and that there's a lot to be said for preventative measures versus treating. But I don't think we're there yet at all. So it's a great point that you're making. So you found out for yourself, you're like, wow, this is working for me. And then how did you get from there to launching your business, which is called Vuva Vaginal Dilators? How did you get from the one to educating yourself on how to create a product, because your background isn't in product creation per se.
So after, it helped me so much. And then I actually used it another time right before intercourse, and it took about, I would say, like 95% of the pain away. If you use it right before, it's going to be even more effective. If you have, my condition was only provoked. So I understand that women that have, unprovoked 24 hours a day, this is going to be a different story for them. And this is going to be a different journey with other treatments as well. So I started crying, and I told my husband, he's like, why are you crying? I'm like, because we haven't done this in years, number one. And number two, I'm going to help so many people. There's this lovely, lovely, lovely man that I met 10 years ago. I was a bartender for 15 years, and I met him at bartending at different film festival events here in town. His name's Robert Smithson, short English man, the best attitude on anybody that you'll ever meet. And I had done some work for another family while I was bartending for 7 years, and they knew him as well. We all just kind of knew each other, and he was an entrepreneur in the printing business, and his business was just booming, going so well, and I just wanted to work there. I went there one day, and I'm like, Rob, I want to work here. I just love it. There's so much room to be creative, and I'm kind of artsy. And he's like, well, the factory's running 24 hours a day doing this, one big company, and I'm not there a lot anymore, as much because it's running so smoothly. And here's a list of ideas. So I looked at them, and I was like, okay. And they all had to do with printing, but a separate business, different items. And I said, okay. So I looked at him all summer. He went traveling. He goes, you can run the business, because he had known I'd run successful businesses before. So restaurants, general manager, things like that. So looked at it. Okay. And then in September 25th, 2013, I thought of this idea. So when I said, Rob, I need to talk to you. And this is just telling, a perfect stranger, kind of, well, not a perfect stranger, but I'm telling a man that I don't know too well about my vagina at lunch, you know? So I said, Rob, but it never was weird, So I said, Rob, I have this condition. I'm going to talk about my vagina. Just listen. And he's just so comfortable. He's like, okay. I said, listen, there's a condition, and this is what it's called. And I made these dilators, and they work so well. And this is what I want to do. Do you want to help me? And he's like, okay. He never once laughed, never once doubted me, never one time. And that's so crazy to me, now that I look back. And I said, these women need help, and this is going to help them. It helped me in 2 weeks. It is going to work. So he's like, okay, well, let's talk to some people. So we talked to some people in the medical world and things. And during this time, my mom was getting prolapse surgery done for the mesh that disappeared inside her and caused prolapse, like a lot of other women after hysterectomy. So I'm dealing with this very high up chief medical director at USF, Dr. Lennox Hoyt. I'm seeing him, kind of asking him questions, but he doesn't know what I'm doing, but he knows I'm up to something. And we talked to some people that own very large medical companies, Camp Institute here, and so we started poking around, and everybody seemed kind of pretty interested. So we're like, well, we need to do a clinical trial. First, the thing is, though, we had to get molds made, which are very expensive and so he just was like, here, let's do it.
How expensive are they? I'm just curious.
Well, our first quote we got for molds was $644,000,
Oh my
which
goodness.
was out of the ballpark because they wanted to do 10 separate pieces, because total there's 10 separate pieces for a set of 5. So then we found somebody to do it for about 60,000 that combined the 5 dilators in the one and the 5 caps in the other. So that was $60,000. I mean, for him to just say, let's do it, and give me $60,000,
That's huge.
yeah, I mean, he just completely believed in it, because he saw the spark in people's eyes when he started talking about it. And then he started, so he would walk around his plant, which had 50 employees, and he would say, I'm kind of working on this. Or somebody would be like, hey, I know you're working on this. My wife has something. My wife has this. It was always my wife wants to talk to you. So it kind of started this little conversation about all these people and friends and family that have issues and pelvic pain, and their doctor can't help them. You start learning, your 5 employees, they come to you and they're like, hey, what are you doing? Like, we made these molds, and we got the product made right in Sarasota, Florida here, and we did a clinical trial. So there's a physicians clinical care research company here in town. They created with Dr. Michael Soar, who's a pelvic pain specialist in town, protocol for a clinical trial, and it was a double-blind placebo study. And it's where some women got dilators for 2 weeks, had a break, and then the next 2 weeks they had magnetic or vice versa. But they never knew there were magnets. And then they never knew, they just thought they were getting their original dilator set back.
So just to be clear, to back up for a second, how many women were there total in the trial?
So it took over a year to find women first.
I bet.
And because to find somebody that knows they have vulvodynia, that isn't on medication, that aren't on antidepressants, that haven't had injections is absolutely impossible.
To find.
Yeah, so what we had to do was broaden the age group a little bit more because we wanted to keep the age group a little bit lower because we didn't want to have any women that had, vaginal atrophy and vulvodynia. So we had to broaden it a little bit and make sure that they only had vulvodynia. So we got 24 patients, but out of the 24 patients, only 11 or 12 finished because this was a year and a half into it now, and it was like, how long are we going to do this? These patients that our demographic exists, but we can't find them because they don't know they have vulvodynia. And their doctors don't even know what vulvodynia is.
Yes, right, exactly. It's this problem that keeps perpetuating itself. And so just for listeners who may not be very familiar with clinical trials, so just to kind of repeat what I think I heard you say, half of them had the magnets inside the dilators and the other half didn't. And then was there also a group of women who weren't treated at all?
No, so the one, say you're the patient, everybody's going to try the magnetic and the non-magnetic because it's a double-blind placebo. So half the patients didn't have magnetic and they all tried both, but they didn't know about the magnets. So for 2 weeks you got the magnets or you didn't get the magnets, then you have a break and then you have it. Yeah, it was designed by this doctor and the research company, and then the doctor, you have to go, whenever you do a clinical trial, you have to go through your local hospital and present it. And it was approved, which was a big step.
That's huge. And the double blind part has to do with both the doctor and the patient not knowing what the patient is getting, right?
I can't, I
think
don't
so.
know. Do you? Because I know that I thought the double blind part was they didn't know that they were getting the magnets, and then the person doing all the test. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, the person doing the test then didn't know either.
Right. Because it might bias them in some way if they knew ahead of
You're
time.
right. Yeah. That, to be honest with you, that was never explained to me, but that completely makes sense.
I think I'm right. If I'm wrong, we'll find out. But it's great that you were able to test the efficacy of it. And so, what were the results?
80% of women, I'm just going to pull it up here because I just want to say the actual, because it can be confusing because clinical things can be confusing and I want to say it the right way. But there's some like key excerpts like out of it that, let me just go to it here.
In the clinical trial itself, did you have to pay for that as well?
Yeah, you have to pay. Yeah, they're very expensive. And people say, well, why don't you have more clinical trials? And I'm like, well, they're very expensive. So
I can imagine.
and especially now would be easier to find patients than when we were trying to do this in like 2013, 2014. It's 2019 now. So 80% of study subjects reported a decrease in overall pain after using the Vuva magnetic vaginal dilators. And so these are just some key excerpts pulling out, but then you're also going to see a slight decrease in pain probably in the non-magnetic dilator users because dilators do help anyways, dilator therapy. So, but you can see there's on the clinical trial tab on the bottom of the website, you can click on it, you can download the full study. You'll see the actual percentages with every patient, and it's very detailed.
That's fantastic. So if anyone's interested, they can look.
Yeah. And so subjects using the Vuva magnetic vaginal dilator experience an average of a 30% decrease in pain levels on a tampon test. So when you're inserting a tampon or an applicator, that is a test that they can do inside of when you go to the physician. And it's associated with measuring sexual intercourse pain. So 30% decrease level in that. The cotton swab test is a test where, say you're looking at a clock and that's your vestibule, and they'll poke around it with a Q-tip and they'll say this was location 1, this was location 2, and what the pain level was. So that's what I'm referring to. So it evaluated 11 different pain locations, and 80% of study subjects reported a decrease in the number of locations. So say you had 9 locations with pain before, you might have 4 after. So that was something that was positive. And then subjects using the Vuva magnetic dilator experienced an average of 28% decrease in pain levels during the cotton swab test. So not only did their number of pain locations decrease, the actual pain level at certain points decreased as well.
That's wonderful. I mean, I was going to say that first of all, I think it's fantastic that you were able to find the resources to do a clinical trial, and you have the data to back up your product. And it kind of leads to my next question, because I really don't know. In terms of regulatory, do you need any kind of FDA regulatory approval to launch a product like this?
You should. That's why we went to Ross Camp Institute, and they said, don't. They said it's millions of dollars. And so I'm like, okay, well, let's try to do a 510K. And that is where you have a device that's equivalent to another device that's already FDA approved, because dilators are FDA approved already. So it's basically like a tongue depressor. But the only difference is ours has the magnets in it. But say you had one tongue depressor, which is a class 1 medical device, and another company is like, I'm going to make tongue depressors. They could get a 510K that says we're substantially equivalent. And that's a lot quicker process, a lot less money. So I went that route, but because we're not substantially equivalent because we have the magnets, we couldn't do that. Well, we don't have millions of dollars to do the FDA approval, which is just a lot of tests. But during our clinical trial, it was shown, no reported side effects, no adverse side effects. We've helped 22,000 women. There are a lot of, as long as you put the disclaimer on your site, these statements haven't been approved by the FDA, things. So that's a way you cover, and you say that you don't treat things, but it's hard when you are kind of treating things to say that you're not. But if you have real testimonials, you can use real testimonials, that helps. I just say it's a sexual therapy device, and I know that's even pushing the limits, but when you don't have millions of dollars and it's a safe item, you could just put it as a sexual, we were in the realm of it's just a sexual device, as long with dildos and vibrators, it's in that. Because that's what a lot of women were using, actually. They go into sex stores and they ask for
Oh, interesting.
they're walking into sex stores and they're asking for the smallest dilator you have, or the smallest vibrator you have, because they don't know where to get dilators, or they don't know what they're called, and things like that. So I dealt with 5 different regulatory agencies, and they all said, you're not going to be on their radar unless you're not on the FDA's radar unless something happens. And your product is so safe. There's so many people doing things. You're not on their radar unless somebody puts you on their radar if something's, and this is so safe. In 22,000 customers, I haven't had anybody ever say this hurt me. Not one time. It is so safe. As long as you follow the direction, the only thing that could happen is you could be walking around with it in and fall, and it maybe could hurt you. But you're not supposed to be walking around with dilators in.
Right. That would be a strange thing to do. So you've had 22,000 customers to date. That's a great number of people that you've helped.
Mm-hmm. And of course, I can't say I helped all of them because I didn't talk to all of them, but the ones that do, I mean, in the reviews and things and the emails saying you've helped, I never thought I could get pregnant again, and I'm pregnant now. You saved my marriage. And I'm just, at home cooking spaghetti or vacuuming. And then you get an email saying you helped me get pregnant, and you just start to cry because you're like, man, I'm just cooking spaghetti over here. And then you get an email like that and you're like, well, this is awesome.
Yeah, that is, and that must really kind of fuel your passion to keep going. I know one of the challenges of entrepreneurship is that you had this gentleman who helped you from a financial perspective. Is it that he owns the company? Do you own it, or how does that work?
I own it. I own the majority of it. We are partners, but I own the majority. He said, when we were discussing equity and things like that, he's like, you're going to own most of it. Needs to be a women-owned company. And he goes, I'm just giving you the money and you can do it. And he helped me along the way. But he said, you're going to own the majority of it and you're the face of it. And I run it on a day-to-day basis. He has his other business. I have questions, when I ask him, what do you think we should do here, there? I can do it without him, and I do a lot without him, and most of it. But he's there because my business is in his business too. Our businesses together, kind of, but separate spaces in a very large building. And I'm glad I have him because it's nice to consult with somebody that makes you think about things that you might not, because he's been in business so much longer than me. 50 years.
It's something that I hear over and over again on my podcast is that mentorship is so important because there's so much that you don't know as a first time entrepreneur, and there's no shame in that. You just don't know. And so to have someone help you with maybe a marketing question or a supplier question or whatever it might be. Did you also do self-education as well?
So I'm just kind of like one of those people that is kind of just natural. Like I'm just natural going into it. I actually stopped things that he wanted to do. I'm like, no. And it turned out to be a really good idea. Like people that wanted to get involved, I'm like, no, I don't trust them. I can read people. A lot of people, when you have something like this, they come out of the woodwork and it's like, yeah, we don't need help. It's just not time. So we both have these qualities that worked really well together. He's more trusting than me. So that's where I helped him with that. But then he knows manufacturing and more than that, and supply more than me. We just worked really well together.
So is it you and him now, or do you have employees that help as well?
I have 1, 2, 3, 4, about 5 employees, and then one of them is my husband actually, which is awesome. And then my business partner who has his business in the same building.
Okay, great. And what would you say if you had to say a competitive distinction of your product compared to other things on the market? What would you say that it is?
So I would say, first of all, we have a patent on the magnetic therapy. So no other magnets or no other dilators have magnetic therapy inside. But a second thing I would like to say is the safety of our product. So it's made here in Sarasota, Florida. I get to see it. I know that the plastic is a medical grade plastic. It goes out, it's in our hands and it goes straight to you. The problem with the other dilator companies is, so if you say this is a prime example and it's so important. And I actually just wrote a blog post about it, about the health risks when you're buying sexual products or dilators. On Amazon, if you go look at my listings, it will say ships directly from us. But I have the prime check mark, right? Because the prime check mark means, free 2-day shipping. Well, you can have seller fulfilled prime now. And the reason I have seller fulfilled prime is, what if somebody, say you buy a normal dilator from Amazon Prime from the warehouse, because that's what that meant, right? It's coming directly from these fulfillment centers. What happens when the person returns the dilators to the fulfillment center? What do you think happens?
Oh gosh, I don't want to think that they go back on the shelf.
Yes, they do.
Oh,
If they're not in a hygienically sealed bag, which the other companies are not because I've ordered them, and they're just wrapped up with no ends in Ziploc bags, they go and they look fine and not used, which if somebody wants to return something, they're going to make it look not used.
right. That's a really horrifying thought.
And I just wrote a blog post on it because these women aren't realizing. And I just ordered some competitor sets and they're from the warehouse. And trust me, I don't get a lot of people wanting to return dilators at all. I've had people send me dilators back after 6 months that are used, like twice in 3 years. Who knows why these people do these things? Maybe they're done with them, but it puts your employees' health at risk
Of course.
and it puts other people. That's why I have a strict no return policy on the website, because now Amazon, you have to allow returns. Well, all my things are in heat seal bags, and I don't get a lot of returns, but sometimes people want different sizes or this and that. But so they're in a heat sealed bag that has a sticker on them that it can't be replicated. So it's not going to be open. And when we get it back, we still put it in a brand new bag and things like that. But if you're going to put it back to sell it, these other companies, they are not in heat sealed bags. You have the highest probability of getting a used dilator set. And I'm a patient. I'm not a man running this dilator company that doesn't have any pelvic pain. I am a woman that has pelvic pain that want my customers to be safe. And I watch every aspect. And I know that I'm one of the only companies that do that, because I know the other dilators are made overseas.
I wondered about that. And when I had researched your company and saw that your supplies came from Sarasota, I realized that was important, because you know exactly what you're getting, as you alluded to. And that is so important. And I'm just still cringing at the thought of getting a used sexual device of any kind. So you talked about patenting. I always have trouble saying that word. Was that a difficult process? Because for a budding entrepreneur, you have a great idea, but it's expensive to patent something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was another thing we started right away. There's a provisional patent and there's a non-provisional patent. Are you aware of that? Those two?
It's more for the listeners, just to people that are listening who might want to do that. Can you explain both?
Yeah. So if you don't know exactly how you're going to do something yet, but you have been talking to people and you need to get this, yourself protected, with your idea protected, you want to go ahead and do a provisional patent. A provisional patent is good for a year, so you have to file your non-provisional within that year, and it protects you, but it's not super specific, but it does protect your idea to say, hey, I'm just trying to figure out how I'm going to do it. I can't file my big patent yet because I don't know exactly how I'm going to do it, but I wanted to protect it because I'm dealing with people trying to figure it out. You've got a year, and then after that year is up, you can file your non-provisional within that year. And if you don't, then you've got to start over again or you lose it. Now, you can file, the thing about patents are, you can file a patent and not get it. So you can spend $35,000, $45,000 and you can be denied. What happens is a patent process, getting a patent within 3 years like I did was very quick, very quick. It usually takes more like 4 or 5. We have the 20-year patent. But what happens is you submit they're called claims, and they're claims about your product and how it's made, and you pictures, diagrams. In the patent, a good patent attorney, which I chose one out of state in St. Louis. His name is Keith Bay. He's amazing. They do all the drawings. They have drawers there. You have to submit images of your product, and they send all this in to the patent office. I forgot what it's called, the ISPTO or something like that. They send it in, and then they come back with about your claims, and they're like, we don't like this claim because of this. We don't like this claim. It's similar to this other product, which mine came back similar to a knee brace. So it's not like saying there's something else like mine just because it had magnets in it. This claim is similar to this claim. It's kind of broad, but you just have to answer. But every time you answer, it's like $3,500. Like with my attorney, it was, which you could answer up to two or three times. I think 3 times. And you can answer up to 3 times basically, and then they'll say yes or no. We just had to answer 1 time, so we were lucky. But you could literally spend, $30,000 and be denied, and you won't know. There's no way to get around it. You won't know unless you try.
Right. And so what is the advantage? You say you have a 20-year patent. So does that mean that no one else can come up with a vaginal dilator with magnets during that time? You've kind of captured that market for 20 years?
Yeah, it's very protected. And when you're doing patents, so this is like a little bit for the listeners, when you're doing patents, you want to make it pretty broad. So ours is like not specific to polycarbonate plastic. Ours is a cylindrical device with magnets inside. So you want to make it very broad. And I've seen some I've actually seen some other pelvic pain products where they weren't they were too specific with the material used. So another company took it, made it with a different material, and it was allowed. So you want to deal with a very experienced patent attorney that doesn't basically do what you say. They're going to take it and say, we're doing this, we're making this more broad, and this is why.
It also reminds me of, like, while it's expensive, there are certain things in your business that are worth spending money on. And I would imagine that would be one of them. So you said you have around 20,000 customers. Are you cash flow positive now, or where are you in your business?
Yeah, we have been for a while. We don't have a lot of overhead, which is nice. And another thing is I did it by myself for a long time. And one of my good friends, Sam, would come in and help and pack the kits when I wasn't cash flow positive, and he would sit there and help me. And he was like my little Vuva angel. I helped him when he got into a car accident. He just felt like he owed me, and he didn't. Nobody owes you, but so he helped me, and yeah, we just did it together, and it just grew. It grew so fast. It grew between 2016 and 2000, excuse me, 2000, yeah, 16, 17, it grew 1,000%. It just goes up and up and up and up and up. I mean,
And how are people finding out about you? Is it word of mouth primarily, or is it advertising, or both?
well, to be honest with you, I'm not allowed to advertise most places because of what my product looks like. So that's a challenge I've faced, and I know other women will. So I can't I can have a page on Facebook and I can have a page on Instagram, but I can't advertise. They deny even Pinterest. They deny every single one of my ads. It's because it's wherever your link ends up to. So I can say, oh, menopause, and check out this that might help you with your, with symptoms of menopause. But if you click through and you go to the site, it's wherever it ends up is where you get flagged. Growing so quickly and not being able to advertise, my only advertising, I'm in on a menopause site. I'm in the Herman and Wallace pelvic course manual, and I'm on Google Ads. I'm not really anywhere because I can't. They won't let me, and it's like been such a challenge to advertise. But it's more word of mouth. I go to physical therapy, the APTA trade shows, because there's a women's health section that deals with pelvic floor physical therapy, which, if you can remember, I want to touch on a little bit later because it's so important. And then I go to ACOG, which is the American Congress of Obstetrics and Gynecology. So it's actually a lot of word of mouth. So if I can be this busy and not advertise, imagine if I could actually advertise. We can advertise erectile dysfunction all day, but no dilators.
That's actually a really unbelievable thing if I think about it, and it's maddening how much money is thrown at erectile dysfunction, and yet there are issues like this that aren't even being talked about. It's a shame. What would you say are the biggest hurdles that you've faced as a female business owner, if any?
I wouldn't say I really wouldn't I wouldn't say as being a female business owner like that had anything to do with any of my hurdles. Probably my biggest hurdle would be actually me talking to physicians telling them about dilators. Like, that's a big hurdle, and then my advertising has been the biggest hurdle. At my blog, I get a lot of visitors to my blog, Vuva Girl. You just had to be creative in different ways to teach people about dilator therapy. I mean, when you're teaching the physicians about dilators, they're walking up going, what are these? You're like, this is who's taking care of us. I'm in the twilight zone. Like, I really am.
Are they ever condescending, or are they accepting?
Oh, yeah. The first, I told Rob, we go to a lot of physical therapy shows, Rob. And I go, this is going to be different. I'm warning you. Because I've worked for a lot of physicians, I worked for doctors. So I said, this is going to be different. And I'm going to warn you that this is just going to be a lot different than dealing with physical therapists who use dilators on a daily basis. Doctors, they can't even help it that in school they were trained medicine, surgery, medicine, surgery, I mean, you go to somebody for your back now, and this is one thing that my father told me. You go to a chiropractor and they want to crack you. You go to an acupuncturist, they want to do acupuncture. You go to a surgeon, they want to do surgery. You can't get mad when you go to a surgeon that he wants to do surgery. How many people have you heard that go, well, I went to this doctor and he wanted to do surgery on me. Can you believe that?
Yeah.
Well, guess what? You went to a surgeon and that's what he does. So that's how he knows how to fix things. That's one of the biggest hurdles. Is the first doctor that walked up at the trade show, guess what he said? He said, dilators are BS, but he actually said the word.
Well, that's very supportive. I mean, why even say that even if he thinks it, like, it's not helpful?
Yeah, which is I go, okay. And then it's funny, the males were actually the worst, the male physicians. And another doctor said, oh, the women I see don't want to use their vaginas anymore.
Oh
That's
my
exactly what he
goodness.
said. I
Oh,
mean, it's worse than anyone ever thinks when you actually just start talking to them, and you can talk to like 50 in a day. You're like, okay, this is why we're at where we're at. And the non-acceptance of even just, well, don't you want to learn about everything when you go to a trade show? Don't you want to learn to help your patients and be the best you can be? No. Pelvic floor physical therapy, what is that? I don't know what that is, and walk away.
you said you wanted to talk about that, and we're getting towards the end of the show. Tell us a little bit about that and why that's important.
A lot of women, once they start dealing with these issues, they go online and they start hunting, right? Because their doctors aren't helping them that much as they would like. And if you have a good doctor, that's great, and I'm glad that they know what they're doing. But the majority of women don't. So they don't know what to go Google, right? They don't know what to look up. You want to look up vulvar pain specialists. You want to look up pelvic floor physical therapy. You want to, women vulvar disorders. These are some of the words that you want to Google when you're looking for a physician. And on our website, we do have a resources tab, and there's a million locators for these types of doctors. Because your normal run-of-the-mill gynecologist, I would be very surprised if they treat vulvar disorders. Some are getting specializing in that now, and that's who you're going to find with these locators. You can also email me off the website, and I will search in your area. That's what I do, and I find these physicians, and then pelvic floor physical therapists. So they're actual pelvic floor therapists for your vagina and your vagina muscles.
That's fantastic. That's such a service.
Yeah, nobody knows about them, and they do manual therapy. So like you could have tightness from your hip causing your vulvodynia. So just like your knot in your shoulder that's causing that shooting pain to your eye, it's exactly the same thing. So they get in there, manual therapy. It is invasive. It's non-invasive, but it feels invasive. It's non-surgical. But they get in and they will go with their hands and go through every pelvic floor muscle that they can reach. They will find one that hurts, and they will tell you how to fix it. And guess what? There's no side effects besides maybe muscle spasms from the treatment, because it's non-surgical and there's no medication involved. This is actually the way things should be treated.
Do most insurers cover that kind of treatment? Do you know?
So in 5 years, it's definitely changed since I started. But mine right now, I actually do pelvic floor physical therapy. Like to show you mine's a $500 deductible with it, and then they cover 50%. So and I have a really good plan. It just depends now. Some plans, that's with any type of physical therapy, though, for me on my plan. But I know like dilators aren't covered by insurance, and some doctors can get them by putting them under a miscellaneous DME code. Insurance companies aren't wanting to pay for dilators, but they'll pay for your $200 gabapentin prescription.
Right.
But they won't pay for a compounded cream with gabapentin in it because that is experimental. But they'll pay for the pill that you put in your mouth. So it's backwards.
You remind me about price. I didn't ask you yet. To buy on your site, it looks like they come in different sizes and there are sets. So how much would a set cost a consumer?
A set right now is $229, and that's for a set of 5. But I always have I'm a coupon girl, and I know women love coupons, so I always have a coupon, 15 to 20%. So you can get a full set for around $185. But most women don't need the full set. That is our number one seller with the most reviews. But I tell people, because let's be honest, when you have pelvic pain, you don't just have pelvic pain. You have back problems, you have skin issues, you have IBS, you have your other menopausal symptoms maybe that are bothering you and you're getting treatment for. So I try to make everything affordable. So I made combo sets, so you can pick two, and they start at $59.69 and they go up. Sometimes if you can get a tampon in, or you don't need the size 1 and 2. You need the 3 and 4 is the most popular Dilator set, yeah. So it just depends. Now, if you have vaginismus, where the muscles are too tight and they're clenching, you will need the full set, especially if your end goal is to have intercourse quickly, you're going to need the full set. But if you have vulvodynia, you might only need and you haven't dealt with the muscle clenching yet, it's just the pain, then maybe the size 3 and the 4 and the 5 is what you need. So there's a lot of different options for you.
And so presumably a customer could ask you or explain what she's going through, and you might have recommendations for her.
Of course. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then can you let our listeners know how they can find vulva vaginal dilators?
Yeah, we're on the web at www.vuvatech, so that's VUVATECH.com, or if you just Google magnetic dilators, I'm the only company. Magnetic dilators, magnetic vaginal dilators. We're also on Amazon, but it's a little trickier to find us on Amazon sometimes because they flag the listings as adult. So sometimes my listings will just be in no man's land. They're on there, but so it's easier to just go through the website. And if you want to purchase on Amazon, there's a link under each item that says purchase this on Amazon, and it'll take you straight there. And just to let you know, it will come straight from us, and so it's safe. It won't come from the Amazon warehouse.
Warehouse. Okay. This has been a very educational podcast. So I really appreciate what you're doing. And I also recommend to anyone who is having any issues of this nature to definitely check out your website, because it is really comprehensive and does have peer-reviewed information that shows the efficacy of the product. You're also very open to talking to anyone being a sufferer yourself or past sufferer of this condition, and you're doing a great thing. So I just wanted to commend you for that.
Thank you. And thank you for giving me the time to share my story, because we're going to help women just from listening to this. It's going to change their lives. So that's why I share my story.
Wonderful. Thank you. You've been listening to SheVentures. Like what you heard? You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to subscribe and sign up for our newsletter so you never miss a show.